Welcome back to the channel. My name's Casey and this is my Jeep. And on this upload, I'm going to be walking around the Jeep showing you some of the things that I'm going to be doing to get my Jeep ready to go on my long distance road trip down to the Oregon sand dunes near Florence. So there's a few extra things that I like to check over before heading out on such a long drive, which is about 10 hours from Victoria. And because I'm going to be traveling on some major freeways, which I don't normally do with the Jeep, I'm going to be doing a couple extra checks. You know, I do keep my Jeep fairly well maintained, but you know, I've got extra gear, I've got the whole family with me, and driving way faster on like the I-5, which I think is like 80 miles an hour, which is way faster than anything we have here on Vancouver Island. And we're going to be doing a lot of driving. So I like to go through just to make sure a few extra things are checked over. So let's get started. So this is going to be the first thing that I check. Now on mine, I'm running these trail ready Beadlocks. I like to go over and just make sure that none of these bolts on the Beadlocks have loosened off. Now, I've never had a problem since installing my Beadlocks with any of these backing off. My Beadlocks are torqued down to 19 foot-pounds. So I don't want to go over them again with 19 foot-pounds. Usually what I do is back it down a couple to 17 so that I'm not over-torquing them as the torque wrench locks out. All right, so as expected, this wheel didn't need any tightening on any of the bolts on the Beadlock. So while you're down here, this is a good time just to have a look over your tire. Make sure that, you know, obviously you've got enough air in it. I like to check all my wheels before I head out. I run between 28 and 32 PSI normally. So if you don't have Beadlocks, the next thing that I would be doing, or the first thing in your case, is checking your lugs. I like to make sure they're all tight. I have my wheels on and off all the time, and I always torque them down when I'm done. But before heading on a trip, I just like to go through and make sure that they are properly torqued. Now I usually torque them to about 130 foot-pounds, so I don't want to over torque them, just like with the Beadlocks. So I'm just going to set my torque wrench to 120, and I'm just going to make sure that there's no adjustment in any of these bolts. Make sure there's no adjustment in any of these lug nuts. And if you're using a key, don't forget that. And as expected, I didn't have any play in any of my lug nuts, which is a good sign. It means that I did them up properly and tight last time I put my wheel on. Now, something you may want to consider if you're heading out on a long road trip is rotating your tires. So there's probably a lot of differing opinion on how often to rotate your tires. For me, and I'm going to say this in kilometers because I'm in Canada, I usually rotate mine every 5,000 kilometers or so. I can do it in my garage, so it's really not a big deal, and it takes me about 20 minutes. Now, I'm not going to rotate them right now because I just did them a little while ago, but if you're about to head out on a couple thousand kilometer or quite a long road trip, then you may want to think about rotating your tires before you head out if you haven't done them in a while and you've put a lot of kilometers on heading around town, because you're about to put a whole lot more on them for your trip. So it might be a good time to rotate them. The other thing you may want to do is when you have your tires off, just inspect your brakes. Your brakes may be wearing down or getting low, and if you're heading out on a long trip with your Jeep on the highway, a lot of stopping, a lot of higher speed stopping, your brakes are going to see a lot more wear, and it may be something you want to check before you head out. Last year when we went down to Oregon, actually one of the guys that was with us ended up having to replace his brake pads when we were down there because they started squealing because they had worn out. Now I just did all of my brakes not too long ago, last January, and I haven't put a lot of kilometers on my Jeep. So I know my pads are good and my tires have been rotated, so I'm not too worried about that, but these are some tips for you guys before you head out on a long road trip. Now guys, here's something you may easily overlook when heading out on a road trip. Now, I'm not saying you need to go and clean your Jeep and have it looking all fancy and ready for a show, but something that I have found when I am out on a road trip is making sure my window is not just clean, but I also like to hit it with some Rain-X. Now, I don't know if you guys ever use this, but you basically clean your window, and then now you put the Rain-X on and let it dry, and then basically wipe it off. And then what happens is when you're out driving and if it rains, the water is just going to bead right off your window. You barely even need your windshield wipers. So when I'm heading out on a long road trip, because I know I'm going to end up in some rain, most likely, northwest, and probably going to be at night, anything I can do to improve my visibility and how well I can see while I'm driving is a good tip. Now, the other thing, I just replaced my windshield wipers. So this is something else to think about. I like to replace them every year. Now, I believe that the manual says to go with 15-inch wipers. You can actually get away with 16-inch wipers. So you can have an extra inch of wiper and get your wiper cleaning a little bit higher and a little bit further over on the side. So replace your wipers, clean your windshield, hit it with some Rain-X, and you're going to be seeing awesome. So let's not forget about our engine. I'm not going to do any major maintenance to my Jeep before taking it out. I've replaced the serpentine belt not too long ago. Now, I also carry another one of these with me. If you guys don't carry a serpentine belt, I think it's a great investment to throw in the back of your Jeep. They're like $20 or $30. And if this thing snaps when you're out on the trail, you're dead in the water. You cannot run without one. So really good little piece of insurance. But basically, before I go, all I'm going to do is make sure that there's not any new oil leaks or coolant leaks, any fluids anywhere in the engine bay. Just give it a quick visual inspection. And then I'm going to just check my oil level, because we all know how 3.8 liters love to burn oil. So I'm going to make sure I have enough oil before I head out on a long trip. And my oil is still looking pretty clean. I don't have too many kilometers on here since I last changed it. I probably only change my oil twice a year, usually spring and fall. And so it doesn't need it right now. It just got an oil change. But let's make sure that it hasn't burned any that I'm not expecting. And we have good oil levels right where it should be. Oil is nice golden brown, not dark and black. So I like to also check my coolant levels. Now, I don't have a stock coolant reservoir. We had a bit of an issue with that one a couple of years ago when I drove off a large sand dune rise. That's when I actually broke my front axle. The reservoir popped off and it kind of got mangled in here and started leaking. So I just bought a stainless steel replacement. I think it's made by Mishimoto off of Amazon. And so I usually just go in here and make sure that I have enough coolant, that there's a little bit in the reservoir. So I can see some down in there. We're good. That means I haven't run dry and there's no leaks going on. Now, one thing I'd always make sure that I have lots of when going out is washer fluid. And looks like we got, I can touch it in there, so lots of washer fluid. That's really great, especially down in the sand dunes. You've got sand flying all over your windshield, but as well when you're driving on the highway between dry weather and wet weather, you want to be able to clean your windshield off. So the only other thing I look for, make sure that I haven't, there's not any new leaks, nothing's sprayed anywhere, don't have any oil or fluids. My brake master cylinder is good. Just gonna check my wiring, make sure that my terminals are tight. I actually forgot to tighten down my my positive terminal once, and when I was using my air compressor, it got extremely hot. You can see right here, it just started to melt some of the heat shrink on it a little bit. The wire is fine, everything's okay, but it wasn't tight. And so when it's not tight, it's gonna arc a little bit inside of here, and it's gonna get really hot. So always make sure your terminals are nice and tight, especially if you work on your Jeep a lot. Make sure that they are tightened down and that you're not gonna have any problems when you go to use your gear. Everything looks to be good. No issues with any of the wiring, nothing's burnt or shorted out or anything like that. So I think the engine bay for me is looking pretty good. And I think that's all I'm going to do under here. So we haven't gone underneath the Jeep yet. So what I've got here is my grease gun. Now I just finished up greasing some of the essential off-road components that I have underneath of my Jeep. All of my control arms from my rock crawler lift have greasable ends on them, as well my drive shaft, which I have a aftermarket double cardan drive shaft on the front. The U-joints on it, as well as the slip yoke on it, requires greasing. So if you guys don't already have a grease gun and you have a lift that has greasable components, I highly recommend that you start greasing them. So something that I do before I go out on any road trip, and then periodically throughout the year, especially during the wet weather where more water and dirt and grime and stuff is going to get into those U-joints, as well the joints on the control arms. I like to just make sure they're always greased up. So I just went around underneath and I'll show you. U-joints will have greasable fittings on them. So you want to make sure that these U-joints as well, there is a U-joint at the front of the drive shaft right here. And then at the end of the control arm, there is a greasable fitting, and they're not on the upper side or the body side. There isn't one here, but each of the control arms, a lot of them do have grease nipples on them. It's just a Zerk fitting. So go through, make sure all those are greased, and make sure that there's no leaks going on underneath the Jeep. So I had some issue before with my transmission pan. It was hitting my drive shaft, but that looks to be remediated. I had to adjust the front track bar. Just make sure there's no new issues anywhere in your suspension components. So you can see my sway bar rubs a little bit sometimes on my springs, depending on just how, if they get bent, depending on how I'm articulating. So there's a little bit of wear on some of my springs here. Make sure that my pins are in for my sway bar disconnects and that everything is looking good. When I'm heading away, I like to make sure I have a couple extra tools with me. So I usually bring a drill set just in case we need to do some sort of repair. This is something that's handy to have. I bring my drill with me, and I bring my big impact. So this is a DeWalt XR 20 volt impact. This thing will knock the nuts off your that sounds funny. This thing has tons of torque. It'll easily take off any bolt or nut that you need to, including your axle hub nut. So this is another thing that I bring with me. This is the impact to take off the hub nut on your front. It's a 36 mil socket, and this guy goes on here once you have your tire off. If you need to replace your axle shaft or your wheel hub or anything like that, but mostly the axle shaft. So if you break a U-joint or anything like that and you need to pull it out, you're going to need this guy. The other thing you're going to need is a 12-point 13 mil socket. So this has got 12 point. These are for the 3 bolts on the back side of your hub. So these are 2 sockets that I always make sure I have with me. I keep them in my glove box, and I've got my impact with me. I also keep a breaker bar in the back just in case, and I'm gonna have my drill, an extra work light. I'll bring a charger for these batteries and just some extra tools. Now let's go take a look at the back of the Jeep, and I'll show you all of the stuff that's in there as well already. Alright guys, so here is the back of my Jeep. All of this stuff stays in here all the time. Now over here we have, on this side, we've got my dual air compressors that feed into a 5-gallon air tank here, regulator, air hose, and my filler. So this is really nice digital ARB filler. It's got a light on it, so when you're filling up at night, you can see exactly what's going on. So this stuff always stays in the Jeep. So what else do we have in the back? Because I have a lot of stuff. So let's just go through and take a look at some of these things. So this first bag here is my rain gear. I always keep a set of rain gear in the back of the Jeep. We have weather changes all the time here, so I have waterproof pants and a waterproof jacket. I also keep a spare set of clothes in the Jeep as well. I don't normally bring a second winch line. It might come in handy, who knows. So here we have my worn recovery bag. So in here I keep extra stuff. This is a second snatch block, and I keep a short, just a short toe strap or strap if I need to hook around something on the body to pull something out, pull it along. In the lower section, I have a tree saver, a toe strap, or actually this is the tree saver, and this is the toe strap. Up top I keep extra worn shackles. There's a couple in there, and as well, if I can get it out, I have another snatch block. Now this thing is pretty beefy. It's rated for 12 tons. This is pretty much everything I'd need for my winch and to get me out of any situation. As well, I have that second snatch block. Who knows what kind of weird winching we may have to get into. This is my miscellaneous tool bag. I keep vice grips, spanner wrench. All of my various tools are in here. You can never have too many zip ties, side cutters. Oh, this box is my bits and pieces box. I keep some extra hose. I have a hydro assist, so if I blow a hose, I've got some extra hose to try and fix it. There's some hose clamps in here, some batteries. That's a thermostat gasket. I keep, these are really handy, extra valve cores. So I actually, when I was airing down, I accidentally pulled one out. So these are always handy to have. Various bolts to do things up, fuses, valve tool, extra airline fittings, electrical tape, all kinds of bolts from my various bolt bins, because who knows when you might need a bolt. More bolts. These are for brake. Dust boot for my front tie rod, brake caliper bolts, wheel studs, just a lots of bolts. From whenever I work on the Jeep, I buy some extra stuff that are in there. I actually keep an extra tie rod in for my tie rod and drag link in here. I have a spare radiator cap. I don't know, I replaced mine, so I threw it in here. Power steering fluid, especially because I have hydro assist. Just in case something happens, we gotta tie that off. I may need to top up with additional power steering fluid. I keep some hammers, big boy wrench. Here is my serpentine belt that I hang onto. I have some additional U-joints. I have a bottle jack. I keep it upright, but in the bag just in case it leaks some of its hydraulic fluid. I also, right here, keep the factory jack. I find it quite easy to use and helpful. So it is just under here. Keep a couple blocks of wood in case I need to make it higher or support it on something uneven. So in this garbage bag I have gear oil, some extra ATF, some regular automotive oil. I keep it all sitting in a spot in the Jeep right there so it sits upright. It's not going to fall over and spill. Impact set. So as I showed you earlier, I bring my impact with me, but this has all the impact sockets that I may need. So all the other regular sockets, different bits, screwdriver bits, hex keys. So we have just every screwdriver under the sun. This is my trunk. I have a Tuffy storage lock system, secure system. So this is up right now. When this goes down, tailgate's closed. The sides of this are all steel as well on the back. So there is no ability to open this up when the tailgate is closed and locked. Great little upgrade to the back. So this just folds down, slides into place, so when the tailgate's locked, can't slide out. All my gear is nicely stowed back in the Jeep, and we're just gonna shut the tailgate. One more bag right here that I keep on the side. This is a weatherproof bag made by Rightline. These are great little bags for storing your gear in. Keep a few things, toilet paper, paper towels, and underneath here I have a full set of thermals that I can use as a change of clothes as well. I keep a toque, a couple pairs of gloves for if it's cold out. So this stays, I know it's going to stay dry in this Rightline bag. I'll be bringing my high lift, I bring my shovel, and I have a full tank of fuel in my 4-gallon Rotopacks. I don't see any circumstances where I'm going to need this on this trip, but filled up, it's good to go. Spare tires full on air. So I put my mud flaps on if I'm going on a long trip or basically anywhere on the highway. Now that the weather's started to turn, a lot of water and rain, and so I like to have the mud flaps on just to be courteous to other drivers. And as soon as I get down to Oregon, I'll take them off for off-roading as well. Anytime I hit the trail, they just have a quick little pin you pull off and away you go. So the last thing I want to show you guys is the inside of the Jeep. So something that I like to always make sure I do before I go out on a road trip is I've got my tablet here, which runs a application called Backcountry Navigator Pro, and it has all my off-road maps in it. So here I have selected the this is the Oregon area, this is Florence up here, and these are the dunes. You can see some of my tracks from previous years. If we zoom in here a little bit, you can see our exploration all over the dunes. Now, the one thing I like to make sure that I do before I go, especially while my device is still on Wi-Fi, is make sure I have these maps available offline. And now Backcountry Navigator is a really great application for that, because I just hit map layers and then I hit select areas for download, and basically what I'll do now is just draw some rectangles over the area of the map that I want, just like that. And then I'm going to hit download, and I'm going to select the maximum zoom level, which this happens to be 17. We're just going to let that download in the background. So you can see Backcountry here is just downloading. So this is completely available offline. This is my last tip before going. So this application is called Backcountry Navigator Pro. I really like it. It's a great application, and I use it for all of my off-roading here locally on Vancouver Island. Well guys, thanks so much for watching this upload. I hope that some of my tips and just a general walkthrough of how I get the Jeep ready for a long distance road trip were helpful to you. If you have any questions about anything you saw in this week's video, or generally about my Jeep, or anything you want to know about off-roading, throw them down into the comments below. I read everything that you guys put down there, and I will answer any questions that you have. I'm going to be heading out to Oregon, so make sure you're following me over on Instagram, Casey_250, because there'll be a lot of real-time updates, photos, stories, and videos while I'm on my road trip. And I plan to take a ton of video while I'm down there, so when I am back, keep an eye on the channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, because I'll be uploading videos from our road trip once I get back and I have some time to edit them all. And the Oregon sand dunes are really awesome. It's a beautiful place, so I hope you guys come back to the channel and check those out, because it will be some good video. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching this week's video. Appreciate all the new subscribers to the channel. Hope you guys are enjoying the content, and I will see you guys in the next video.